Hi guys, this is Benjamin and Lindsay. We're here today, and welcome to church. So we were reading a scripture today, and it was in Proverbs 5. It was talking about love and relationships, and we wanted to share some things with you and how we felt. Um, Proverbs 5 spoke to us. So if you want to go ahead and share.
And just have a conversation. Like, this isn't about us being right about anything or being wrong, or it's just that it's okay to have conversation as Christians and as people just trying to like figure out what you believe. And so, don't take it as doctrine, but just take it as you're part of the conversation with us. So you can start.
Well, when I think about the scripture, uh, the author is talking to or writing to a child that he has, and he's trying to give that child wisdom by saying, don't look elsewhere when you're thirsty, when you're hungry. You've got this beautiful wife in front of you, and that should be your nutrition, for lack of better words. And I find it interesting how he uses food to symbolize a hunger for sexual things, especially in your spouse, and how they should go to your spouse and come from your spouse. And he talks about a spring and a well. A spring feeds the well. And I think about how thirsty some people are, and they're looking all over the place. Some people are even going to wells that don't belong to them.
That's such a common like pop culture word too, is like thirsty. Like when someone's got thirsty eyes, they're just like trying to drink you in.
Yeah, I've always called it hungry eyes.
Hungry eyes, thirsty eyes.
And they're like, I'm hungry.
I hear it a lot too when they're like, they see like a girl on the prowl for some guys. They're like, oh, that girl, she's thirsty. And so it's just funny that like the Bible kind of references it the same way, and how pop culture has it, they're right on board with the terminology.
Yeah. We don't go into these relationships and get married so we can just trade wives, trade in our car once we don't like it. Or it's not even really about like. I find so many men, when I talk to them, that they just want a new ride, and their car's in perfectly good shape, and I'd say it's just weird a lot of times, and they'll admit that they're just dissatisfied, but they can't explain why, which is strange. And so, is the dissatisfaction coming from a thirst or a hunger, or is it physical, or is it mental? Maybe.
I think like what I really wanted to focus on, and it ties in with that, with this passage, is taking something for granted. And like the title, like within the Proverbs 5, is never take love for granted. And I'm trying to say I'm trying to not say granite, like countertop granite,
Like a rock.
for granted. And it says, never take her love for granted. Why would you trade enduring intimacies for cheap thrills with a whore? But, what does it really mean to take something for granted? And what I really think is that it's the idea that there could be something better out there, but also
Sure.
the idea that if you wanted to return back to the thing that you had, it would still be there. And I think that's kind of like the twofold idea of what it means to take something for granted. Like, there could be something else out there that's better, but if I still wanted the same thing, it'll still be waiting there when I return. Because, like, what are some things you take for granted in regular life? Like, you take for granted that, your food is in your refrigerator and it's going to be there when you get back. You can go out and go get fast food, like, on your way home or whatever. But, if for some reason you can't make it there and you just have to go straight home, well, you're going to have your food there anyway, right?
Yeah.
And so, it's going to be there either way. You have your choice around it. And so it's when we apply that to relationships, it, that's not how people work. Like, people work a lot more intricately than
Sure.
food or cars or whatever else.
I think that might be the problem with our hungry unsatisfied sexual culture is we've turned it into fast food and cars and cheap thrills, and that sex is not a spiritual connection with another being. And I hear people that are Christians and non-Christians say that they believe that it is a deeper connection.
In the beginning of the scripture too, it says, uh, otherwise you may one day come home and find your barrel empty and your well polluted. So it's like, something you took for granted in the beginning, you may come home one day and it's not there like you remember it. And I think that's where so much of, like heartache and heartbreak comes from people, is when in relationships you start to take the other person for granted, and then you come back, and because you just kind of left it be, that it's changed into something that you don't remember it, and then I think that leaves both parties kind of upset and unhappy. And not even like in a sexual way. Like you may have like taken it for granted in terms of what that other person does for you, and then you come back, and because it has been left unappreciated, you left the car in the driveway for 2 months because you're driving something else, and now it's not gonna like start up, or now there's rust in it, or it's not like you remember because you didn't take care of it.
Yeah, that was something that I wanted to talk about too. Is you come home, your barrel is empty and your well is polluted. It's a fairly strong warning, and it's a cause and effect. And we try to so many times act like there's not a cause and effect to these things, when there definitely is. And we have friends right now that are fighting over what we're talking about right now. And a lot of it could have been helped just by communicating better with each other. And, for example, they're seeing other people, but they didn't communicate that, but they're still together. But maybe they're not, but they are. So why didn't they just say, hey, can we see other people?
I think not feeling that there's pressure in communication, like that it's okay to talk about things that are hypothetical, or just feeling free to talk with the other person is such a benefit in any relationship.
Sure.
Because then you don't feel like, I've heard so many people in their relationships being like, I feel like I'm walking on eggshells.
Right.
And it's like, that is the last thing you want in a relationship with another person who you're supposed to love and trust.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think that comes from good communication.
Yeah. Well, what is good communication? I think good communication is when you can ask the other party, the other person, your spouse, any question, then you can actually get an answer. And
yeah, I would say so.
I'd say the other side of that is sometimes we expect a certain type of answer and response.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
And that's a trap as well. But you gotta watch out for the traps.
Like, do you like me in my new dress? Say yes.
Yeah, I say yes 90% of the time.
No, I think you look fat.
I'm
what? No. But yeah, expectations is a big. That's a whole different conversation.
Yeah,
but
it's a whole different conversation outside of this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Between springs and fountains, and So we've got words for alcoholism, and that's a disease and so forth. And I can't metabolize alcohol, so I don't struggle with that.
There is like such thing as sex addiction.
Right. Okay, there you go. Sex addiction. You're a sex addict. Will Ferrell said it in Blades of Glory. So, he said
That's how you know it's real.
He said he was never satisfied. So.
How do you say it?
What?
How do you say I'm never satisfied?
He said it with aggression. I'm never satisfied.
That's what I was waiting for.
So, there's definitely a hunger there, and we're all very aware of that hunger.
Like we said, thirsty.
But I guess I was trying to say is, I guess we can't call people sluts, but I call people sluts all the time.
But you say it in an endearing way.
I do say it in an endearing way, but at the same time, they're acting like a bunch of sluts.
Can you say the word slut as a Christian? Yes, you can.
Yeah, I definitely say it outside of the context of sex.
Yeah.
Like if someone's just eating too much cake, I'm like, stop being slow with that cake.
Yeah.
But I guess they're just taking it all for themselves. They want it all for themselves, and they're not thinking about the consequences for themselves or other people.
Everyone is responsible for their own consequences of their own actions.
True.
So it's like, if you're gonna do it, you're gonna do it. It's not gonna hurt me any, usually, unless you're like, I have a gun pointed at me or something like that.
If you got a gun, you better have some mace.
I got mace. Actually, I don't have mace right
Lindsay
now.
does not have mace. She sprayed her mace in her office the other day.
On accident. It exploded. I fumigated the entire office with mace. Terrible experience. So the ones that you love, this is about love and what God says about love. Don't take them for granted, because then you come back and things aren't as you remember, and then everyone's going to be sad, and that sucks, right?
Yeah.
How is a way that we could take the other person for granted that we might not realize that we're doing it?
Thinking about yourself all the time.
Yeah. Selfishness
Yeah.
is huge.
I think too, from observation and what the book says, it's a stumbling block to that person themselves. They stumble over themselves. But what's that mean? Does that mean they're stumbling over their mind, or they're stumbling over something in their heart? They're stumbling over their physical body? I don't think it's their physical body that they're stumbling over. I think it's the mind. That's where really the war wages on, is in the mind.
So how other ways could you take someone for granted that's in a relationship? Think about your mediation sense.
Okay, so how other ways you could take someone for granted? You just look elsewhere. Looking at porn all the time.
But that's also, so those are both selfishness.
Yeah, pleasing yourself.
What about not going out of your way to thank the other person for things that they've done for you?
Oh, got my ear. Oh, what's up, buddy? Oh. You want to be? He flopped the pillow. So,
Did you hear what I just said?
no. Then Andy was licking me. Hey, buddy, it's getting hot over here. Ooh,
I said, what about not thanking the other person for things that they've done?
oh, lack of gratitude.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that attributes
that's a good one.
to taking something or someone for granted.
Yeah. All right, I'm moving on to the next point that I have. Can you have both? Can you have the cheap thrills and the trade-in vehicle, and a woman that you love, that brings you great sustenance when you've been walking through the desert all day, and you finally get home and you're just like, man, I cannot wait for that cold, refreshing cup of water, aka your wife. Andy likes cheap thrills, but his cheap thrills are balls, dog parks, birds on the beach, sand crabs.
Look at his little face. Hey, do you really know the most distracting part of this video?
I found it interesting. I was looking up the word discipline, Webster's dictionary, and it was talking about, a disciple. What's the root of the word? A pupil, a disciple. And I was like, is that how you spell pupil? Like the I? Like a pupil, a student pupil? I pupil? And I was like, oh, it is. And I didn't know that because I cheated when I was in elementary school, my spelling tests. And so I didn't know how to spell pupil and pupil. Happens to be the same spelling. So I was looking at an eye and looking at wells, and I realized that the eye, when you look at that beautiful little orb in your skull, and how the pupil is basically that center dark area, and it almost has like an edge that goes down into the eye, and you can see into it. And if you look at some ancient wells, you can see really some of the striking similarities. And you might find some revelation in that if you seek it out. I know it struck me pretty much an awesome way of how similar those are, and that's we draw things into the eye, right? And again, we're talking about intimacy and sex and so forth, and those are I know for men and women that we draw that physical beauty in through the eye, and the word is telling us to be disciplined with what you're seeking, with what you're looking after, what you want,
what you take in,
and what you draw out. Mm-hmm. There's some interesting similarities there. And
when Ben told me about this before, he was like, did I tell you about like the Wells? And he has a bit of a southern accent, and I thought he was saying whales. He was like the ancient whales. And I was like trying to think of a video or something he showed me with like old whales, and I was like, I can't think of anything, babe. And then I heard him saying it again in the other room, and it was like ancient whales. And I was like, are you trying to say whales or wells?
I'm looking for ancient mammals swimming in the ocean.
So it's wells, but that's a good point.
Yeah.
What do we take in with our being? That's a whole other topic too, but yeah.
We take in, we draw out.
Mm-hmm.
Be disciplined with what you take.
And then with what you draw out, you're giving to your family. So.
That's right. Don't pollute your wells.
Mm-hmm. Or your whales.
Or you'll have diarrhea. Or gonorrhea.
Alright guys, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in our next video.
Peace.